I call to order the February 26, 2018 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And first item, approval of minutes of February 12, 2018 regular meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the February 12, 2018 regular meeting as submitted.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. It's now past the hour of 7 o'clock. We have a public hearing to consider petition number 235-02796 from National Grid for replacement of direct buried cables along Indian Meadow Drive and Agawam Drive in order to supply more consistent power to homes in this neighborhood. National Grid, are you here?
That's it. Pull the plug.
Wow, that's a first. Seriously, that's it.
Who said he was here earlier?
I thought somebody said, hey, I'm here for the wires. I said, yeah.
That was for the cable, chief.
Bump it for the chief and go back.
Yes. I think we'll just proceed with the next item on the agenda. Fire Chief David Parenti. Oh, yes.
I'm a homeowner in that area. And
Yes.
I have a question in regard to the petition here.
Well, if the representative from National Grid isn't here, then I think we're just postponing for a few minutes. We're not going to pass over the item. We're going to proceed with the next item, and then if the gentleman shows up, or gentlewoman shows up, then we'll proceed with this hearing.
And that's fine, as long as if he doesn't show up, we can take some note as to my comments.
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Chief Parenti, swearing in of Richard Duong as firefighter paramedic. Yes.
Come on up, Richard. Rich, sit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this has been in the process for quite a while. We posted a position back in August when Captain Houston retired. We ran the process. We said, wouldn't it be great if we could get 2 people out of this list? Well, we got the first one, which we hired, Peter's sitting back there, and then we got Rich. The only problem with Rich was he didn't have his paramedic certification yet. But we thought he was going to be a really good candidate. We liked him, had a lot of passion, but he was pretty much at the very beginning of his clinicals, right, which is 300 hours?
Yep.
And then your ride-along, which was 240 hours? And I don't know how, but sometime between November 24th and now, he's completed that, passed his written, and passed his practical for his paramedic.
Excellent.
And I'll be honest with you, our original drop dead date was back in January. Because of his dedication, his work, he showed me that he wanted to be here. So we extended that by a month, and it well worth it, no question in my mind. So Rich comes to us from way of Littleton Fire. He's a call firefighter with Littleton. He graduated from Littleton High School, correct? Yeah, and then got your paramedic degree from Northern Essex Community College. Interestingly enough, Richard's, as we were getting close, timeline-wise, Richard's professor sent me an email and said he's not going to make the timeline. He's going to make it as a paramedic, but he's not going to make the timeline. And I don't know if you know, we went back and forth several times. I did with your professor. And that was another thing you should thank him, based on what he had to say. He just said he's going to be terrific. So we're very, very excited to have him here. He is going to be he did attend the call vol fire officer 1 and not fire officer, firefighter 1 and 2. But he will have to go to the full-time academy, and you're starting that in July, right?
July.
Fun time to go to the academy in July. So here I'm introducing you to Richard Duong. Very excited to have him on board.
Excellent, great, thank you very much. Richard, very happy to have you on board. We certainly are looking forward for very skilled, very capable, very motivated people on the force. I think we have a great crew in here, and I think you're going to find it's just an excellent, excellent force to be associated with, plenty of people to work with, and a lot to learn from. So certainly appreciate your joining us, and comments from the boards? Jeff?
Just glad to have you, glad that you chose us. You know, all these guys pretty much, you know, everyone thinks we choose firefighters. Firefighters choose Northborough too. And we're really glad to have you, and It's a great addition, so welcome.
Thank you.
I can see
Thank you.
through you.
Leslie?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like Jeff, I'm very happy that you're here. I think we have a wonderful department, and you're a wonderful addition, obviously. And I wanted just to reiterate your credentials: a paramedicine degree from Northern Nexus Community College in Lawrence, certified EMT paramedic having passed practical exam on February 18th, attended Massachusetts Fire Academy 2015, where you attained your firefighter 1 and 2 certification, also certified as a hazardous materials operations level responder. So very impressive. And the other thing I wanted to do is to maybe ask you to introduce family and friends who are here with you this evening.
Absolutely. Starting from right to left, it's my girlfriend Alex Pietrogallo. Been going out for 3 years.
Nice to meet you.
My mother, Bo Seb. And my sister, Gianna. Alex's parents, who have been great to me over the last couple of years, Bonnie. John in the back behind Alex. And a great close family friend, Marie.
Excellent.
That's wonderful. Takes a lot of support.
Absolutely.
And so thank you very much for everything you've done as well to support him in his endeavor here. Also, with your department here, if everyone could introduce themselves, that would be wonderful. If we could start over here.
Dylan Kessler. Captain Jamie Desitone.
Pat McManus, firefighter, paramedic.
Jeremy Peters.
Matthew Chin.
Captain Rob Tuff. Captain Dan Wilhurt. Captain Fred Hurst. Firefighter Peter Gallus.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Super Department. Thank you for your support and everything that you all do on a daily basis. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Nope, just want to welcome you. Chief, this brings us to a full staffing level.
Right now, yeah.
So, well, we're very happy to have finally reached it.
Yes, we're very
So,
excited to have
I'm sure the
5%.
department is happy to be there, too. So you're coming to a great department, and you're a great addition, so welcome.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, I sat on the interview committee, and Richard was very impressive, and I'm glad you made it finally. And welcome aboard. It's a great department. We love the fire department, so welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And with that,
You get sworn out.
do we have swearing ceremony? Yep, Andy Dowd.
Step right out here.
I, Patrick Long. I,
Richard.
You passed the first test.
That was great.
Comic relief.
do solemnly swear that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and will support the Constitution thereof,
And will support the Constitution thereof.
so help me God.
So help me God.
I, Richard Long,
I, Richard Long,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties incumbent on me
all the duties incumbent on me
as firefighter paramedic for the town of Northborough,
as firefighter paramedic for the town of Northborough,
according to the best of my abilities and understanding,
according to the best of my abilities and understanding,
agreeably to the rules and regulations
agreeably to the rules and regulations
of the Constitution,
of the Constitution,
the bylaws of the town,
the bylaws of the town,
and the laws of this Commonwealth,
and the laws of this Commonwealth.
so help me God.
So help me God.
I, Richard Long,
I, Richard Long,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Congrats, Richard.
You're welcome to stay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All done. I'm coming back.
Thank you for coming.
You bet. Don't forget the donuts. It's a new guy there. He's gonna have to do it. He already did yesterday.
Do we have a representative from National Grid here? Apparently, we do not. Under the circumstances, we won't be then conducting the hearing, but I'd be happy
With the indulgence of the board, I recommend that you leave the hearing open at the moment and proceed with your agenda. Otherwise, we're going to take, I mean, we certainly can take, it's only 10 after 7, we can take some comments, but what you really want is the representative from National Grid here to respond to that. If the person doesn't come, we certainly can take the comments. My recommendation would be to continue the public hearing to your next meeting, a date certain, and that way we can follow through and respond. But in the chance that the person is on their way, we might save these nice folks another night out if we can. So it's really for the residents' benefit that we would do that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
If you all do not mind waiting for a few minutes, and we'll see how it proceeds. Thank you. Which brings us to reports.
Well, moving right along, huh?
Bill?
So the interview committee met this evening, and we interviewed a great candidate, and I move the board vote to appoint Heidi Knight to the Cultural Council for a 3-year term.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Very good.
Okay. And on February 14th, Dawn, Leslie, and John, and myself took a tour of the 2 houses that the Habitat for Humanity on Main Street in Northborough are rehabbing. They did a wonderful job. They have Assabet Valley helping. We took a nice tour. They showed us all the work they've been doing for the past year or so, and it's totally incredible. I mean, to look around what the house looked like before and now, it's incredible, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
It was great. Very, very good. So that ends my report.
Thank you, Bill. Don?
Well, the Fire Department Building Committee met on Friday, and by agreement, the board has decided not to come forward at this town meeting. It will be a little too rushed, and we want to make sure that we have everything finalized as far as putting it before the town financially, that we have all the right numbers, and that we really have the time to develop the whole project. So the thought at this point in time will be there will be a special town meeting in the fall, and then there will be a ballot question in November on the ballot. So that's the plan right now, so we won't be coming forward at town meeting this year. But the work continues to move along as far as the architects, and everybody's on board as far as having the department go forward with a new building, so, of some sort, and somewhere. All to be decided. So, the next item I have is the Northborough Cultural Council. They're actually having a reception at the library on April 4th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock to celebrate the recipients and the Northborough Cultural Council, and people are invited, the public's invited, and the whole board has been invited, so we would love to see you at that.
I heard
like
you speaking, too.
I am.
Oh, boy.
So anyway, Northborough Free Library, 34
wanna
Main
add that
Street. April 4th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and my speech will probably not be the highlight of the evening. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Don. Leslie?
Okay. Just to add on to what Bill said about the homes for, Habitat for Humanity homes, yeah, it's very impressive to see what those kids are doing and how they're supervised by the people at Assabet Valley. The kids are very, very knowledgeable. We're very proud to be showing us around and showing us some things that they had done as we walked around the buildings and on the various floors. Very, very impressive. They're very proud. One of the cool things they did was to bury a time capsule outside the front building, because in the process of rehabbing, they found some papers behind the walls that go back to when the building was a general store.
Pinesies.
What was it?
Pinesies General Store, right?
No, it was, John, help us out. What was the general store?
The larger building with the columns was a general store at one time.
Right. Do you remember the name of it?
I do not. I don't.
I don't think any of us were around then,
I
were we?
want to say it's Gale, the Gale
Not
General
even me.
Store? Is that what it was?
I think that's what I'm thinking. So it had
Yeah.
something to do with Cyrus Gale, right?
Yeah, it was Cyrus Gale, yeah, because the library was named
Yeah.
after the family, too,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So those items and a couple other things were put into a PVC pipe and buried out front, which was very nice.
Yeah, it was
A nice
cool.
picture was taken, I think, of those kids, so congratulations to them. I also wanted to say that I think it's very cool in the back of Chief Liver's police report, monthly police report, that there is something called Nice to Hear files. And I won't read these, but I think it's very nice when people pass along their thanks to the department, because so many people have negative things sometimes to say. I don't want to say that people are happy to complain, but unfortunately, those are the things that surface, and I think it's wonderful to hear positive things like that, and I'm glad that you put those in your report, and I want to encourage all residents, if something wonderful happens to you, please pass it along, because our police and fire work very, very hard, and I think it's important for them to hear positive things and thank yous as well. So even on the Facebook page, I think for both departments, that would be welcome. I also want to thank Scott Charpentier. Is he here? No, he's not. Okay. He provided a Public Works project updates, covered a lot of information here on pavement management project, Crawford Street wall reconstruction, which is absolutely gorgeous, Fisher Street culvert replacement, the town common, West Main Street sewer pump station improvements, Edmund Hill water tank rehabilitation, sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration program, Church Street culvert replacement, and the CPF cemetery projects, so, and water meter upgrades, which I think probably people are aware of. So I just wanted to thank him for his very comprehensive report, a lot of really good information in there about what's going on with that department. And lastly, if you could please go to nfpantry.org or the Northborough Food Pantry Facebook page, which will give you a list of some things that are in need right now. There are a lot of items. And I've seen some postings on Facebook about the fact that they really do need some things. So if you wouldn't mind checking that out, that'd be great. That ends my report.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Jeff?
Just real quick, remind people, town meeting is coming up. It's your chance to be heard. And John, I'm going to ask you for the date again, because I always...
April 23rd.
23rd.
Yep.
At Algonquin, it's really important that people, show up, give their opinion. It's our chosen way to run our little form of government, and it depends on you. So, please make an effort to show up. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. I have no report tonight, other than to say, on the topic of recreational marijuana, we are continuing to monitor the progress of the Cannabis Control Commission and take note of the steps being taken in surrounding communities to prohibit or regulate, and be sure that the bylaws that we're putting in place are as complete as they can be. The Planning Board is holding their public hearing next week, Tuesday, March 6th. And Board of Selectmen will be following with a public hearing on the general bylaw that dovetails with the zoning bylaw to prohibit. That's all I have for tonight. John?
No report.
No report. Very good. This brings us to the public comments section. Fred, we don't have the representative here. Okay, thank you. Yes, National Grid?
Yeah, sorry.
Welcome, yes. We have a public hearing for the petition for buried cables along Indian Meadow Drive and Agawam Drive. Can you discuss or take us through that, the proposal and the plan?
So some of this cable is direct buried, older cable. They used to just dig it, throw it in the ground, and now we put it in conduit systems around sand. And this cable is failing now, so we're replacing these sections to give it more reliable for the neighborhood.
Okay. Have there been instances of outages becoming more frequent in the neighborhood?
None that I know of, but I know we've been doing a lot of cable replacements, probably 30-year-old cable, so I'm guessing it's either gonna start failing or they have some reported fails, but I don't know any of the failures.
Okay. Fred, do you have any comment or?
I do not. The engineer that I spoke to who did the application indicated that it was for reliability and better performance. There's a section, there are a couple of sections where conduit's being added. There's some other sections where they're gonna do some injection to have some material in the conduit around the wire, and that all of the people in that neighborhood may be inconvenienced temporarily while power's being shut off and turned back on, which is why the whole neighborhood was notified as an abutter.
Okay. Is there, is this all original cable essentially with the development, or?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Any questions from the board? No questions. This is a public hearing. Do you have questions from the public? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my first question
Can you,
is,
can you please identify yourself first?
my name is Gary Tissue, and I live at 23 Indian Meadow Drive. And in the neighborhood, it mentions the work will be start at David Street and Agawam at the intersection. And is that on the eastern side or the western side where it's starting? Is my first question.
There's an intersection.
So I didn't engineer the job, so I'm just following along.
Well, Agawam doesn't, there's no David Street, and Agawam doesn't intersect David Street, it intersects Indian Meadow Drive.
Right.
So yeah, it's gonna be Davis Street, Agawam's Drive. Yeah, so it just intersects at the riser pole, where it goes underground there. Should be nothing with Davis Street, I don't.
Yeah, okay, well, I just was given a blueprint, so it's clear that it goes around. So in the description of work, in regard to trenching, it talks about will be done on side of the road in the grass area within the public right-of-way. Well, my question is how will you handle crossing driveways?
I believe they do cut-ins, but they re-asphalt them.
I've just spent $15,000 getting my driveway redone,
Okay.
and I have 4 inches of asphalt and 14 inches of crushed stone. And I would like to see a drill underneath, just like Fios did.
You have like directional drilling across it, so
Yeah.
they don't cut?
Yeah, and it's a single width driveway, it's not double width.
Okay.
I did see when we dug up the driveway, there was a piece of conduit there, and it went halfway across the driveway, and the rest was wire.
Right, yes, could have been old, like road crossings.
Yeah, and so how can I get a guarantee it's gonna be done that way?
I don't answer that, but I can speak with the civil, I can take your information down and speak with the civil department. I don't deal in that.
Well, also, the note on here should be changed to include that information. Okay?
Yeah, I'm a homeowner on Agawam Drive, and I haven't seen the path of this
Excuse
thing,
me,
but-
excuse me, wait. One person at a time, please, and let's take it in orderly fashion here. Fred, are you able to kind of collect the notes about?
Actually, what I have is a sign-up sheet. If anybody would like to be contacted, they would give me their name and phone number. We could give that to Josh, and he could forward it to whoever is responsible for the engineering to reach out to them and get them the assurances that they're looking for.
Okay, very good. So everybody got that? If you have any concerns or something, please leave your name and contact information with Fred, and he'll put the right person at National Grid in touch with you for any specific concerns you might have. Sir, are you all set for now?
Just one other comment. You were asking about outages. On the eastern side, which is where I live, there actually have been several outages, and there has been the injection of that material put in, which actually has helped that. We've been having outages probably for 10 years or longer.
Like I said, it's probably 40-year-old cable, so it's, the ground shifts and starts deteriorating cable.
Yeah, it was laid around 1980.
So we certainly, at least in your experience, there is a need to have this work done
Yes.
in order to improve the reliability of the electrical service to the
Yeah.
area.
I was totally agreeing that it's appreciated. There's been transformers blowing
Yeah.
in my next door neighbor's, in front of his house. From the issue of shorts and water and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. But, yeah, my concern for me personally is,
Yeah.
I don't want to destroy my brand-new driveway.
Sure.
Okay.
Understood. This gentleman was,
Robert Cometa, 5 Agawam Drive. Yeah, I'm sure all the homeowners that live on there don't probably want their driveway dug up. And so I'm just repeating what this gentleman said, that I would not want that to happen either.
Right.
And he's right, that when Verizon came through a number of years ago, they went under the driveway, but, so I just want to repeat with that. So that-
Okay.
I'm sure our civil department has that capability. Again, I don't answer that question, but I'm sure they would know.
And is it a trenching, or they come with like a backhoe and dig up? I mean, do you know anything about?
So yeah, I think they come with like a trench, like wizard, I guess it's called, and it just makes they
This
make
makes
it
a trench?
just big enough for like a conduit, and then they put in, so it's gonna be primary cable, so they'll put 2 3-inch. So we'll have a spare conduit, so if anything ever happens, they'll just pull wire through it. But they'll have one that's live and one that's just gonna be a spare conduit.
So they're kind of gonna slice it into the ground, right? It's not gonna be like a backhoe, and then I gotta dig everything up and stuff.
I would not anticipate it would be that destructive, but,
Again, yeah, that's a civil department to talk to.
Josh, do you know the depth of the conduit?
That, I do not know that. Again, I know the civil deals with all of that stuff. But I can find all that information out for all of you guys.
sir?
My name's Mike Berardi, 14 Agawam Drive. I just wanted to say, this gentleman just said the same thing. I wanted to mention about the surges and power outages we've had over the years. And it's been related to our neighborhood, so this is long overdue.
Sure.
My concern is when they do the project, what's gonna happen with outages to our home and how long are they gonna last? That's my question.
They'll usually coordinate outages with you, and it should be, they'll try to pick you up as fast as possible. They'll probably have the new transformers ready to go, all the cable up to that point, and they'll just plug in the elbows when they're ready to
So
go.
we'll be notified when these outages are gonna happen?
Yep, they
Or
will.
surges, for that matter?
They'll send out a letter to your house.
Because I'm concerned about like electronics in the home and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any surges, but they'll let you know about outages for sure. Like I said, they'll probably have these, they'll sweep the conduit right into the transformer, have it all ready to go, have the wire in there, and then they'll just either let you know when they're gonna take the outage. They're gonna, however, take the terminators off the old, like, wire, how they used to go in, and now it's gonna be an elbow, so they'll just have to make up the elbows and plug them in. Make sure everything's good and there's no clearance issues or problems.
And I have the same concern. I don't have a new driveway, but I'm concerned about the condition of my driveway after this project is completed.
Yeah, we'll look into, like I said, directional drilling is what they call that, so we'll look into it.
Has this kind of work been done in other neighborhoods recently in town?
I don't know specifically in this town, but I know in like Marlborough, we've been doing it, and I know we've been working. It's been an ongoing project.
I'm just wondering if there are any show places in effect where people could take a drive-by or something and see the condition of how recently the work was done and the condition of like the lawn and driveways that were in the path of
I think some work was done up at Coolidge Circle. It's a little bit more significant than what's being proposed here. But there was some done about years ago around the Coolidge Circle neighborhood.
That's your house.
Do you happen to know if we had any record of complaints from any?
They didn't come to our office. I did go out to talk to a few residents, but mainly the National Grid handled all the complaints and issues.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Anyone else? I'm sorry, I got this gentleman in the
Hi,
back.
my name is Ethan Lippett. I live at 161 Indian Meadow. I'm concerned about so the permit itself, in terms of the reading of it, it talks about a trench, but in nowhere in the permit, it's more like an addendum to the permit. You listed the chemicals that you'd be installing, and I just want to understand exactly what's going on with that. Do you have the exact name of the chemical that's going to be installed in my lawn, essentially?
That I don't. I think you're talking about that like cable injection that's going in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Do you have a list of that? Of the chemicals that we use?
All I have is the
All right.
application.
Yeah, again, I don't know. This is like our civil deals with all of this stuff, but
Okay, and will the operators on site have the MSDS for the chemical that's going to be installed?
I would suspect they would have to, yes, because if there's any outbreaks or any situations with it, but.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just an injection that they put into the cable. It works as almost an insulation around the cable, so it stops from the ground erosion and ripping through the cable and causing these faults to ground, so.
do you know what the basis for this chemical is at all? You refer to it as an insulation, is it?
I don't, I'm sorry, I don't
Is it
deal,
silicone based, is it, foam based?
I would say like a silicon, yeah.
Okay, so so if there was ruptures or something like that, I could expect silicon shards or something? Where are we going with this? I mean,
So yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't deal in this enough in this situation. I would think most of the time we do conduit. So I just think they may pick one little area they don't want to dig up or something and inject this like, I guess, an insulation base to it. So I don't know, again, I'm sorry.
And it just will magically bond to the,
Yeah, I think they like wipe the cable, prepare it, clean it and get it all ready, then I think they like deep inject it into like the cable and it just molds around it.
okay, so you're gonna trench everything and then you're going to inject the actual cable with a direct application?
Right, yeah, they have to expose the cable first.
All right, I was under the impression from this that the trenching was only gonna take place down into Agawam, and the rest of I think the rest of the diagram shows that it was more injection based, but apparently you're trenching everything?
Yeah, I mean, there's some conduit being installed, and then maybe some areas where they're saying it's not as bad, or they weren't seeing as bad of outages. They would like to get a little bit more life out of the cable, then they just inject that substance into it.
Okay, and it's to replace the original
Right, insulation,
gasoline or
yeah,
whatever was in there,
insulation around the cable.
petroleum base.
Exactly.
And then, what is the protective housing for the cable at this time? Do you know what it was installed 40 years ago?
Yeah, it's probably some sort of like plastic molding maybe before. Again, it's probably copper wire inside of it, and then I couldn't tell you what they direct, wire's changing all the time with us, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's either like old Romex or something.
No, it's probably it's a bigger, like concentric neutral type cable, and there's multiple layers to it.
Okay,
So, yeah, I mean, different kind of bases inside of it, so.
right, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have any more information.
Again, if you would like to submit specific detailed questions about
Yes.
the composition of the materials and also the specific plans for which runs are going to be conduit, which runs are going to be injected, that kind of thing, or something, please,
Right.
put together those questions and get them to Fred.
Yeah,
and-
the permit isn't very clear. It's kind of weird because it looks like it was written and then the injection was kind of like an afterthought and I'm not really sure what's going on and, you know, it seems like it was interesting to look at.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Richard Zeba, 209 Indian Meadow Drive, and like these gentlemen in front of me, I would prefer not to have my driveway trenched. It's not brand new, it's a few years old, but it's usually beginning to the end. But another point, I have some bushes at 35 years at the very end of the street. I'll be happy to cut them out if you need to. You just tell me when.
Okay.
That's a good reason. It's a great excuse.
I'm gonna have to charge you, I'm sorry.
I think someone ought to consult with his wife. That did not go the direction I thought it was going.
I'm sorry, they're gonna take them out.
Town told me to do it.
We'll start tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Bob Bramley, 193 Indian Meadow. The gentleman had come to my door last summer at some point, it might have been last spring, from National Grid. They had said that in some sections, they were gonna actually have to put junction boxes on the property.
Okay, yep.
Okay, it didn't say whether it was gonna be in the ground or above the ground, whatever. I do notice on the map here that right on my property, there's gonna be a junction box. I'm just, wanna find out a little bit more about where it's gonna be located. He didn't really have a specific answer to that question when he came out, whether it was gonna be on one side of the driveway or in the front of the house, you know. So, I'd like to get some more information on that if I could.
Yep, certainly. So we usually put them on property lines, and it's just a switching location. A junction box is just a switching location for us. So if there's ever a problem with these underground faults or something like that, we can pick up half the neighborhood and maybe like isolate stuff like that. So it usually goes, and our civil crew will prepare all of it, and it goes on a like fiberglass box pad, and it looks essentially like a coffin. And they can lift it up, and it has all the cables
So
and.
it's flush or level with the ground?
No, it's gonna usually be above it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the green boxes and stuff like that.
A couple feet above him, or we,
I would say maybe like to the top of the box, maybe 2.5 feet above it.
okay.
So, and like I said, it looks like a coffin, but it'll be locked, so there'll be no access for children or anything to get in there. And then if it ever does rust out or rot out, we usually check on those and we maintain that 100% after, so.
I know that a lot of the boxes, a lot of the ones in Indian Meadow right now, the covers are broken, there's holes in them. The ones that are raised, 2 or 3 inches, I've called several times and
Right.
complained that there's massive holes, 6, 8 inches in length and several inches wide, that, animals could crawl into, a kid could reach their hand into there.
Right.
And there doesn't seem to be much of a response of anybody coming out and replacing those or repairing those. This is going back 5 or 10 years, I've been calling.
Right, wow, okay. Yeah, I would think that maybe they're just hoping this plan, they do it all in one time, but usually we replace stuff like that if we get calls on it, because that's a safety concern.
All right, thanks.
Tom?
Yes.
Are all the transformer boxes going to be replaced?
I would think so, yes, because they're gonna, usually they do everything brand new. They get rid of the rotted out stuff like that, so usually they do. If it's within like 5 years, 10 years, they might leave a box, but usually we put all brand new stuff in.
And are there details available that show which will be just, when they refurbish the cables with the injection, do they still trench down to it, or is it just from end to end?
I would think that they would have to expose it, yes.
So everything around the neighborhood where it runs will be trenched?
I would think, yes. And then some will be conduit, and the gentlemen that don't want their driveway, they'll have to find a way to, like, they punch holes through it, and then they can just install conduit. But I would think, yes, it would be trenched the whole way, and then they just have to get down there so they can either cut out a spot and splice it, and then inject it, or whatever they do. I don't know that side of it that well, but, and I've never dealt with a project of that scope like that, so.
So we get our name on the list to get better information?
Yep, and I will definitely follow up with that.
Do we have anybody who hasn't spoken yet who would like to speak? No.
Just one follow-up, Randy, I don't know if anybody's asked the question, if it was, I did hear, when is this supposedly gonna take place, and about how long is it gonna take to get it done?
That I don't know. Usually that goes to our scheduling department. I don't answer any of the scheduling questions, but, so usually if this gets approved or disapproved, if it's approved, it goes through to our scheduling, we start on it. I would think usually the springtime, we want probably the best soil to dig if we have to. And then if it gets disapproved, it goes back to the engineer, and then they have to work either other options or come up with solutions to the problems that have come up for today, so.
And then we'll be notified, I'm assuming, of the timeframe?
Yeah, and then it starts the process of we notify, we do sections at a time, I'm guessing with this, we're not gonna be able to do this whole thing in, say, a month. You know what I mean? They might work on this one area for a bit, then they patch it up and everything else, get the sidewalks paved down and stuff like that, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here, let me start back at the beginning of the circle here.
Okay. I just have one comment. When my driveway was getting redone, we did see the conduit going halfway under it. What my concern was, when I saw that, it was only 12 inches down. And I thought it was supposed to be like 2 feet down for electrical.
Right, again, that's why they just buried stuff back in the day, and, yeah, that's why we're dealing with this.
Well, and then a National Grid fellow came by the house, and we pointed it out to him, and his comment was, well, the gas pipes down there, so we can't go any further. Gas pipes are buried 3 feet. That was the wrong answer.
Well, gentlemen, if we have specific issues that we need to address for this project, then let's confine to that. But if you don't mind, past complaints or failed response isn't going to serve the purpose of
But
this.
my only question to that is, getting back to like what Fred had asked, what is the depth, the plan depth?
Right. So we clearly need more details about the project going forward. Yes, John?
If I may, through the chair, make a suggestion tonight, given the fact that we do have some questions and concerns that have been expressed and their valid need for information, my suggestion to the board, or recommendation would be that you continue this public hearing and don't render a decision. We don't want to disapprove it and delay the project, but we also want to make sure that everybody's questions get answered, then you get the information. That needs to take place between National Grid and you folks directly, by and large. And so my recommendation would be continue the public hearing to a date certain, which would be our next meeting, March 12th at 7 o'clock. And then the And then between now and then, if you folks would make sure National Grid has your name and number and your questions, we typically step out of the middle of it, and we expect National Grid, that's why we have this public hearing. That's why you get notified, so that if you do have questions and concerns, there's an opportunity to be heard and an opportunity for them to cure or take care of it before we provide them with the authorization, for the board provides them with the authorization to move forward. And so that would be my suggestion this evening, that you continue the hearing. Anybody that has a question, make sure they have your contact information. Between now and March 12th, we'd expect National Grid to get back with the answers to your questions. And then on March 12th, the board would then reconvene. Somebody from National Grid will be here. You're all welcome back. And assuming everybody's happy, everything's been answered, then they can render a decision, if that makes sense.
Yes. So,
Sorry for the lack of information. I didn't engineer this job, so I'm just covering.
We're going to bring the guy who
Sure.
engineered the job next time, right?
I'm hoping.
Right?
Hopefully. It's not my decision.
Just hoping it's not you, right?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
One final comment?
Okay, so this was more just a question directed to the board than about this topic. If we had not asked these questions, would you be voting on whether to approve or disapprove this measure at this time?
If you had not asked these questions, we probably would not have reason to postpone approval of this project.
Okay, that's all I want. I just wanted to understand protocol.
Thank you, thank you for your vigilance in coming here tonight, asking these questions, and, we certainly want to get you the information you need to be comfortable with the project when it goes forward.
Through the chair, if I may, just, you're not going to receive another notification because the hearing's been continued. It's March 12th. That's the only notification that we're going to be giving, okay? I just don't want people to say, oh, I forgot, you didn't send me another letter, just so we're clear. All right?
Yep.
Just one question on protocol. You guys had mentioned Fred earlier, so did we talk to Fred or we talk to this fellow for our questions?
It might be convenient between the gentleman and Fred, they'll take all of your contact information. I would ask you to formulate your specific questions so that they're communicated exactly as you intend to phrase them. So. And with that.
If the questions are numerous or complicated, what I'd like to do is to take names and phone numbers and direct National Grid to contact each and every homeowner who wants a contact.
Yes, that sounds fine. Thank you.
Make sure that we're getting everything answered.
Yes. Questions, comments, motion?
Just, do we need a motion?
We need a motion to continue. Leslie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, thank you, Josh.
Come.
You were in the hot seat.
I'm sorry, I'm not more educated on.
You did a great job.
You did well.
You did a great job.
Fine,
Thank you for
fine.
being here.
He was sweating up there.
Also, too, this is the most discussion I've ever seen on a National Grid petition, so this is great. And without your questions, we would not, as Jason said, we would not have known necessarily about some of these issues, so. Also, too, is trying to think about efficiency of this. I noticed that Fred was taking notes, too, and I think a lot of the issues that are being raised are of interest to everybody. So, I don't know how this is gonna happen. Is it that National Grid is gonna contact each person individually, or are residents going to hopefully be here the next time, so everybody hears all the answers, or how's this going to happen?
I would expect that we'll get a list of names and numbers, and that National Grid will contact each and every one, make sure that they're satisfied. I'll follow up with National Grid prior to the next meeting and send you another memo, let you know if there's any outstanding issues that couldn't be resolved or couldn't be resolved to the satisfaction of the abutters and why. And then somebody, Josh or somebody else, would come with him, perhaps the gentleman I spoke to who filed the application, and then we'll have another discussion at the next meeting. My understanding from my preliminary discussions were they were not in a hurry, that they were anticipating in the spring after the thaw was out. I would expect it to be April or May at least before it starts.
Okay. Sound reasonable? Okay.
Do I have a motion?
You have one more question.
It's just a comment. I think you did great.
Thank you.
But bringing this gentleman who designed the plan here would pull everything together perfectly.
Right, exactly.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Motion to continue?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to continue the hearing on petition number 23502796 from National Grid for the replacement of direct buried cables along Indian Meadow Drive and Agawam Drive.
Second.
to a date certain, March 12th,
To March 12th.
2018. Next scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen. As amended?
As amended.
Is it seconded?
Second.
All in favor? Very good, thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
for
all,
calling
I
in, guys.
appreciate your, thank you.
You can hang out.
Oh, everybody's bailing now, right?
Nobody wants to hang with me, you know?
Got a lot more work to do.
Bring the donuts, you got the other
See, that's what it is. We're gonna get our, we won this morning. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
First 4 days, I always have.
Thank you all.
What the product was.
Next item is the public comment section of our program. Anybody care to offer a public comment? Hearing none. Thank you. And new business, update of preliminary fiscal year 2019 budget. John?
In your meeting packets is a memo from me providing you with latest information with regard to fiscal 19. In that memo, the first 3 pages are basically a restatement of the goals and objectives that we established and discussed at your December 14th financial trend monitoring presentation. I'm not going to read those to you this evening, but again, it's a combination of our short-term goals and objectives and our long-term goals and objectives with regard to making sure that we're taking care of not just the fiscal year, but our long-term liabilities, and we have those long-term considerations built into our budget process. In terms of the latest information, I give you a couple of updates regarding state aid. On January 24th, the governor released his budget. A few days later, we got our first peek at the cherry sheets. Now, it's one thing to get the governor's budget, or his local aid budget, which he's always excited to release. But we wait, and then usually within a week, we'll get the full cherry sheets, which are the state aid increases, but also the assessments, because we get money from the state, and then they take it away with the other hand as well through assessments like mosquito control, charter school assessments, things of that nature. So we did get a chance to look at it. Our budget is carrying a 1.3% increase, our budget model for state aid, which is about $68,000. Not a lot of money on a $5.24 million account. When we looked at the cherry sheets, our assessments have increased by about $27,000. The net effect is basically that we anticipate our state aid is going up about $40,000 or 0.77%. Now, everybody always looks at me like, but I heard the governor say that we're going to get, our state aid is going to match what they're looking at for general revenue increases. Yes and no. They're only matching in terms of their general revenue increases, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4% or so. They're only matching that for the lottery aid, the unrestricted local government aid. The bulk of our money, 3/4 of it roughly, comes from in the form of Chapter 70, which is our school aid. So again, our budget is carrying 1.3. We're looking right now at 0.77. So I wouldn't run out and revise anything. There's a lot of time between now and when we get our final state aid. This is just the governor, that's the first pass, then the House, then the Senate, then the Joint Conference Committee, and then the governor signs off on it, and then usually the legislature will then override the governor and spend more money. So we don't typically know where our actual state aid is going to be till long after town meeting sometime in the summer. We've had our state aid in difficult times not have our numbers until the fall. But we are not going to have any more real information between now and town meeting. I'm comfortable. The difference of $20,000 or $30,000 on the budget is negligible. But it just goes to show the comment that we spent some time talking about at our December 14th meeting was that state aid, because it's increasing so slowly relative to our budget, what's happening is we're slowly shifting, from these other revenue sources, and it's having an impact on the taxes. Just to give a little bit of perspective, in fiscal year 2003, state aid was over 13% of our operating budget. In fiscal 18, it's about 8.5%, and it continues to decrease. On the one hand, that's positive in that your reliance on state aid if you want to spin it positively, if you want to try. Our reliance on intergovernmental transfers has been lessened, which makes us a little bit more secure because we're relying on our own local revenues. But the reality, as we all know, is every dollar in state aid that we don't get is a dollar we need to raise someplace else. So in terms of the budget model, I feel comfortable with our assumptions that we laid out back in December. It's playing out more or less like we anticipated, but the real message here is I don't see under any scenario between the House, the Senate, and the governor that we're going to see radically different state aid. You know, on the other side, on a positive swing the other way, we might see 1.5% in state aid instead of 0.75%. So that's pretty much where we are. Now, in terms of new growth, those figures haven't changed. We're estimating about $30 million in new growth, which is basically new economic development, which results in a little over $500,000 in new tax revenues. Our budget model back in December was based on that similar model. Again, we still have that warning that, you know, our new growth figures are at about a 15 or a 16-year low, and that's coming off of rather significant economic development with the mall in Avalon Bay. So obviously, we're not going to sustain growth at that level. Those are one every 20-year type of a development. But we're still looking at $30 million in new growth as far as our budget base. The one bright spot that we have in our revenue estimates right now is, as we said back in December, these have not changed. We're looking at increasing our local receipts by about $300,000. We're anticipating motor vehicle excise improving and our local option meals tax improving. So two things. One, when the economy starts to look a little bit better, people buy new cars. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. So that is usually a leading indicator of the overall economy. The other is that we've seen that the economic development that we have seen, when you look at the second phase of the mall project, it's mostly all restaurants. And so we've picked up that additional meals tax. So we have motor vehicle and the meals tax improving, but our building permits are down. So basically, when you look at our economic development revenues, and we track our elastic revenues, these are revenues that will grow and contract with the general economic cycle. So we track that. Again, they're leading indicators of what we might see. But it's interesting because you have to drill down into the data. You see some growing, and you see some contracting. So motor vehicle excise and meals growing a little bit, but then you see the building permits contracting. So overall, the data looks flat, but it's more dynamic than that. There's stuff happening underneath. Bottom line is $300,000 increase in fiscal 19 for our local receipts. So that's positive news for us. In terms of outstanding budget items, we have two big things that I just want to kind of recap briefly tonight. One is our health insurance. As you know, we started identifying and working on a solution for our rather extraordinary health insurance increase this year. Our loss ratios, our claims data is not very good at the moment. The market is trending at 6 to 8%. So we were looking at about $1 million increase in our health insurance. Back in November, we started meeting with all of the collective bargaining units and working through the Insurance Advisory Committee, looking at options. The option that won out and was recommended by the IAC was for us to basically take our health insurance and go out to bid, which, as you know, we did. We got very positive results from that, and ultimately, the Insurance Advisory Committee recommended that we consolidate to one carrier. Fallon was the recommended carrier, and that we proceed with that consolidation. Despite the fact that that's a recommendation of the Insurance Advisory Committee, under state law, we then have to negotiate that change with every single bargaining unit. So we're doing this jointly with the high school, even though the region is a separate legal entity. So all of the bargaining units at the high school, the K-8 schools, and the general municipal government all need to be bargained with. At this point, we have gotten agreements or sign-offs from every bargaining unit except for one. And so we're continuing to have a dialogue with that one remaining bargaining unit. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll get there, but we've made great progress. That process is not concluded, but we're nearing that point. So we've made, as I said, excellent progress getting up to this point. So that's one outstanding issue that still isn't completely resolved yet. The other is more of an update. We had a bit of a budget surprise. This is something that happens periodically in the 11th hour as we get this far in our budget. Our Algonquin Regional High School assessment came in with a significant increase, about 8.8%. Back in December, when we did our financial forecasting, we looked at it, our budgets were forecast to go up 3.5%. So the Algonquin budget, Algonquin High School budget, 3.5%, K-8 in general government. We never make a forecast on the assessment because the assessment is a factor of Chapter 70 school aid from the state, which we talked about a moment ago, but also it's a factor of enrollment and shifting enrollments, not just what's happening in Northborough, but what is happening in Southborough. So we have a rather significant shift in enrollment this year. So the high school budget's going up 3.5%, but due to that enrollment shift and the way that enrollment shift plays through the Chapter 70 formula and the minimum local contribution requirements, and I'm not going to try to explain that tonight. We spent an hour on Saturday with the Appropriations Committee at the hearing going through just this issue. And the Chapter 70 formula is probably a week-long workshop if you ever wanted to try to take a stab at understanding it. But the bottom line is it's a $916,000 increase. And so when we put the budget together in December, or at least our budget models, we were not anticipating dipping into our excess levy capacity. So just briefly, under Prop 2.5, our budget's allowed to increase a certain percentage, 2.5% each year. That's the levy capacity, not your budget, but the levy capacity. And then there are limits. The town has been very fortunate. When we got that significant economic development we spoke about a few minutes ago with the mall in Avalon Bay that went in, we didn't grow our budgets by that amount. We held the single-family home taxes very low. We brought those new revenues in, and we used it to stabilize the tax impact during the recessionary period. And that was very fortunate for us. By doing that, we create levy capacity so that, so that we have additional taxing capacity without having to seek a Prop 2.5 override. Right now, based on this assessment, we're going to need to dig into our excess levy capacity by about $500,000. And so that has two things to keep in mind. One is there will be a tax impact for that. It'll be about another $75 to $78 in the average single-family home. The other is, when we looked at our 5-year financial forecast, we were not planning to dip into that levy capacity in fiscal 19. Now that we are, it's going to require updating those forecasts because it means we're using that levy capacity sooner than we anticipated. So in terms of the assessment, it is what it is. And I want to be very clear about this. It's not due to a decision that the school superintendent made or the school committee made in terms of the level of services. They're not hiring more teachers. That's not the root of this. It's just a shifting in enrollment. A good example of this is Assabet Valley is our regional vocational tech school. We're reducing the number of students that are going there, and their assessment this year is actually going down by about $127,000 from what it was last year, just because it's a regional school and the enrollment is what drives your share of what you pay for that budget. So the positive thing is that we have been very conservative in our budgeting, and we've been very conservative in our taxing. We have not taxed to the maximum of Prop 2.5, which is why we have that levy capacity, which is why we're able to absorb this increase. But it is important that I want the board to be aware, and we discussed this with the Appropriations Committee at length on Saturday during the school budget review meetings, that it will have a tax impact like everything that we do. So I'm not advocating, nor would I recommend at this point, that we seek reducing the budget. I can tell you, particularly at the high school, the budget pressures are significant. And just like what I commented on about how state aid is becoming a smaller percent of our operating budget, the high school, being a regional school, is a separate legal entity. Same thing's occurring there. You want to know why your assessment's going up? They're seeing the same very modest increase in state aid. And so what that means is the budget is going up, more than that, it's being made up through our assessments. So, same thing that's playing out at the regional level is the same thing that we are facing in the K-8 in the general government. So, again, it's not bad news, it's not good news, it is what it is. I think the good thing about this to explain is that this is shifting enrollments, and so we're paying a bigger piece of the pie because we have more kids going to the school. That's the primary driving factor. So in the memo, I kind of detail out where the key budgets are, and at this point, the K-8 school is going up 3.5%. That budget has been voted and approved by the school committee. The general government, so all the non-school departments are going up 3.5%. Those budgets are wrapping up. We have some debt to finalize, and we have the health insurance that I just spoke about that we're trying to finalize as well, but we're pretty much, we know what the limits of what we can go up, and that's 3.5%. Assabet Valley, actually I misspoke, they went down 129,000. And then, of course, the high school is increasing $916,000, the operating assessment. One thing that we are looking at, the superintendent is working with the school committee, and they are going to refinance the outstanding debt on the high school project. And we anticipate that we will see a reduction in our debt service. Probably not, we may or may not see it in time for town meeting, but that's really irrelevant. We will know before we set the tax rate in November, as we do every year. And if those numbers come down when we set the tax rate, the tax impact will reflect that lower debt assessment. So that's kind of where things are. At this point, Appropriations continues to hold their budget hearings. They're meeting this Thursday, they're meeting next Thursday to wrap up their review of the departmental budgets. And then on February 26th is the joint public hearing on the operating budget that takes place with the Board of Selectmen and Appropriations. So that's just a general update on kind of where things are. Outside of the high school assessment, things are pretty much on track with what we discussed at your December 14th meeting.
Thank you, John. Comments? Bill?
John, you're gonna refinance the debt loan on
Yes.
Algonquin, and what, for a lower interest rate, or just restructure the loan for a longer pay period, or?
Oh, no, we're not like turning a 15-year mortgage into a 30.
30,
No,
okay, I was
That's not
nervous
saving
when I
money,
heard-
that's paying more money.
Right.
That's an excellent question. No, we're refinancing it to a lower interest rate. Municipal bonds aren't like traditional debt instruments. We cannot just call our bonds, they're not callable. You have to be out 10 years, and you have to save, I believe, 2% overall to make it worthwhile. There are rules and regulations that dictate when you can do this. And so they're working with bond counsel and their bond advisor to make sure that, given the climate right now where interest rates are starting to bump up, that this still makes sense. One piece I forgot to share that's very important is, as part of this process, the regional high school has to get rated by Moody's and Standard & Poor's, by the bond rating agencies to basically determine their creditworthiness. They've jumped up to basically a double A plus under Standard & Poor's. As you all know, when we issued the debt for Lincoln Street, our bond rating was increased from a double A2 to a double A1. For those that don't know, double A1's better than double A2. As I stated on Saturday, there's only one triple A rating that's better than where we are. And I jokingly said to the folks in the audience, our bond rating will never be any higher than it is right now unless you all make more money and build $1-million homes, and that's pretty much it. It's the socioeconomic demographics of the community. What drove us up to this rating that we have now is our management and our policy and our decade-plus long track record of managing ourselves well, having appropriate reserves, taking care of long-term liabilities, things like that. The high school has benefited from that because Southborough's bond rating is strong, ours was upgraded, which meant theirs got upgraded. That will only add to the potential lower interest rate that they'll see if they go out into the market. So we anticipate that it'll be worthwhile, there'll be some savings there. And, again, it just shows another way in which the superintendent is constantly looking to save money in a way that doesn't impact the the services. So,
Another part of my question, hold.
Yep.
When we increase the, what you said, $500,000 for the Algonquin
Yes.
budget, now, that's not gonna go over 2.5, though, it's just adds another $500,000 to the levy limit, right?
Yeah, basically, when you're at when you're at your levy limit, if you've taxed to the max of Prop 2.5 every year, then if you need more money, you have to go to the voters for a Proposition 2.5 override for your operating budget. Since we have not done that, and we have levy capacity, and you know this because we've talked for years, we've planned out how we're going to use this levy capacity until things, we start seeing additional revenues from the state and more economic development. But no, that's within the confines of Prop 2.5. It does require, like all appropriations, town meeting action. It does not, however, require a ballot vote, which a Prop 2.5 would.
I just wanted to explain to people, because
Yeah.
I was nervous that,
Yeah. Look, I always say this, I'm from Connecticut, okay, so there was no Prop 2.5 in Connecticut. And to some degree, it's semantics, because the only difference is, whether or not you have to go to the voters to ask to increase taxes beyond a certain point. But when I worked in Connecticut, it's the same thing, it's all tax impact, okay? Whether or not you have to ask for an override, or go to a ballot, or go to town meeting, it's still tax impact, and it's something that I know this board is very cognizant of, and we don't ever seek that additional taxing authority from town meeting unless we need it. And again, this is unique to Massachusetts, but the bottom line is, whatever we do, we have to justify the level of services that we're providing for the tax impact. And again, I think in Northborough, we have very good value for your tax impact.
thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, just, I guess, John, more of a comment. You touched on this a couple of times, is, the working relationship with the schools. And, for those of us who've done this for a while, it wasn't always like that.
That's right.
And, it's just, I don't think it can be stressed enough to people to understand that, because we have that good working relationship, we're able to, kind of wade through all of this. Also looking, as we talk about enrollments increasing, that's a good indicator of what people think of our schools. Is rather than, putting kids in private schools or whatever, people are moving to town for our schools, and, they realize that there's a value there. So while, an increase in enrollment, means an increase in our assessment, it also is a pretty good indicator of what people think of the schools. So, again, more of a comment than a question.
And I'm sorry.
Yep. Sure.
To the chair, I was just going to say that on Saturday, that same sentiment was spoken with regard to the working relationship, the excellent working relationship between the school committee and the board of selectmen and the superintendent in my office, was made by a member of the school committee and echoed by several other folks. So it's felt on both sides.
Leslie?
Yeah, I just wondered, is there ever any method of appeal, I think I've asked you this also privately, for the assessment, that would force further explanation of how they come up with the figure, since it does seem to be a little bit of a question mark? I mean, we know enrollment is the trigger, the main trigger, but
Yeah. No,
are we it's just handed to us and we're left with that?
No, I think we've gotten to, there is no appeal. The assessment is what it is.
Okay.
It's the formula, and we spent a lot of time on Saturday talking about the formula, how it goes back to when Prop 2.5 first came in, the base was frozen, and then they just keep layering complexity up on top of the existing formula. If you remember back in fiscal 2014, the state started playing with the formula, and they were changing the wealth factors. And that caused a significant shift in the assessment from Southborough to Northborough back then. And that was a formula change. They haven't changed the formula, it's just we have increasing enrollment, and that enrollment plays through the formula and the minimum local contribution. It is what it is. They have a committee that was formed and made recommendations a couple years ago. In fact, our legislative priorities letter speaks to it. That made recommendations on changes and things to be done to the Chapter 70 formula. The fundamental issue with that is, if they make changes to that formula, there'll be winners and losers. And so they've been very reluctant politically to change and to fix the formula because they don't want to create losers. So what they've done is they just add another layer onto the formula, and so everybody's held harmless, and then they try to shift or accomplish what it is that they want to do to get resources to whatever district or whatever cause it is that they're focused on. It could be immigrants from Puerto Rico, as it is right now, and from the storms and so forth. It could be special ed related. It could be any number of things. And they just keep layering on top of that. But they never fundamentally fix the issue and the flaws in the formula at the base level. And it's difficult for them to do that because you've heard me comment, we have a neighboring community that receives literally twice the state aid, literally twice the Chapter 70 money that we do, for no apparent reason other than that's how it got locked in years ago, and that they would be one of the losing communities, and we might be one of the winning communities, and that's not a very popular thing politically. So the legislature has been very hesitant to really do anything meaningful with the formula. It's one of those things, nobody is happy with the Chapter 70 formula. Everybody thinks they should get more money. Some towns, like Northborough, actually should get more money.
We deserve it.
Well, not according to the formula.
I know, that's
And
true.
that's part of the problem, because it depends on what you weigh and the factors that come into play. The wealth factors hurt us, because we're a fairly well-off community, and because we are well-managed, and we have things like financial reserves, and believe it or not, we talked about this, the fact that we don't tax to the max of 2.5, that we're conservative in our budgeting, actually hurts us in the Chapter 70 formula. I relayed the story, Jeff, of a few years ago when one of our legislators made the comment about tying our state aid somehow to the level of financial reserves that a community had. And you very appropriately pointed out that, so what you're saying is you're going to penalize the communities that are well-managed, that have emergency funds in place and that haven't taxed to the max.
Yeah.
And you remember that conversation?
Oh, I
I'm
remember it
sure.
real well.
Well-
Yeah. Remember my comment was that if you do this, I'd advocate we spend every last dollar every year, because what's the
Exactly.
point in saving?
Exactly.
You're gonna get penalized.
And so in the Chapter 70 formula, there are wealth factors that if you aren't taxing to the max, it means you have capacity. And if you have any money in your stabilization fund, which we do, it's one of the reasons why we have a AA1 bond rating, is because we can withstand a temporary interruption of revenues or a natural disaster or anything else. It's no different than in your personal life. In an ideal world, you'd have 6 to 12 months of liquid assets so that if something happened, you could pay your mortgage and all the things you need to do. That's what our stabilization fund is. The fact that we have the appropriate level and we haven't taxed to the max through the Chapter 70 formula, it doesn't help us. It doesn't help build our case for why the state should give us more money. So,
Leslie?
I just want to clarify, though, at the meeting, that's not really how you phrased it about Jeff. What you actually said was that Jeff almost climbed over the table to throttle the person as he was speaking.
Jeff, it's one of my favorite stories, but I was trying.
If you were here,
for the
he
cameras
was, we
tone
had
it
to
down a
restrain
little
him, remember?
No,
You did.
bit. Yeah.
I'm a teddy bear.
Sure. So, it was classic, though.
I'll just say that Leslie and I were in attendance at the appropriations meeting on Saturday in discussion of the school budgets, and I have to echo the sentiment that it was all very constructive in the presentation of the information to the Appropriations Committee by the superintendent and by their very thoughtful questions on the Appropriations Committee to ask about clarification for certain aspects of the budget. But I think everyone understands the financial framework that we're working within and understands the adverse effect of the Chapter 70 formula in part to put us in the situation that we're in. I did get a handout from Superintendent Johnson on the Chapter 70 formula. It's a multi-page handout that purports to explain how the formula works. And about halfway through, I was thinking this was reminding me of the Robin Williams bit where he talks about how the game of golf was invented. So if you haven't heard that, you might go and investigate that. It's at least as entertaining. The other thing I'll just mention is, as you mentioned, John, the fact that we have equity capacity and can you know, it's kind of an adverse circumstance in terms of this budget impact, but the fact that we have the budget capacity to absorb it, that's just an example from our financial trend model where we talk about fiscal distress and fiscal crisis. This is an instance of fiscal distress, but we've got the capacity to mitigate it somewhat and buy ourselves the time we need to address it over a longer period. So this is, in some sense, affirming the policy and the directions we take in the management of the town finances. So thank you very much. I appreciate all the work you've done to try to grapple with these things, as you say, at the 11th hour for some of the budget components here. Appreciate that. So, next item, status update on fiscal year 2018 snow and ice budget.
So I hate to even say this out loud, but right now, we are still in the black on our snow and ice budget. I'll get everybody knock a little bit. So we budget $387,000 roughly in snow and ice, and we have approximately $60,000 remaining at this point. Usually, if we've had a very bad winter, this is about the time I would come to you and let you know that we're going to be deficit spending. And our goal always is to deal with a deficit in the current fiscal year. Snow and ice is one of the only accounts that we legally can deficit spend and make it up on the tax levy the following year, because obviously you can't know for sure what's going to happen. You can have very bad winters, and you can have relatively mild winters. We tend to budget about a 6-year rolling average, so it's not like we under budget, and we do have years where we finish in the black. And but right now, just an update is that we've got about $60,000 left. I don't anticipate that we're going to get out of this month of March without any snowstorm. You got to remember too, sometimes we have these winters where they seem to be mild and we don't get a lot of plowable snow. But you have to keep in mind that these freezing events can be very expensive as well, because you've got if you have rain, the temperature drops down. We're out salting. So I always appreciate the DPW director gives you a list of literally every event that we've had. So we have 10 snow events and 13 ice events. So generally speaking, we have far more icing events than we have snow. And the trucks are out, and you're applying product that costs a lot of money, and that's how we rack up the bills. And in some respects, the freezing ice is more dangerous than the snow. I think people intuitively slow down when they see heavy snow, but black ice, I think, has caught everybody by surprise at some point during their driving career. But in any event, at this point, we're still in the black, and just because we haven't said anything to you, I just figured I'd give you an update.
Great. Any
Thank
questions?
you. Appreciate the update.
Okay. Next, review of the preliminary town meeting warrant.
So in your packet is just a draft of the listed out articles right now, potentially on the, for the town meeting warrant. We have basically, excuse me one second. We've closed out the deadline, so everybody had to have their warrant articles into my office by February 5th. And so really, this is just a shot at putting that in a summary list without a lot of additional information, just so you can get a sense of the types of information or types of articles that have come forward. You'll see from the list, we've got about 48 articles in total, which is a fairly reasonable town meeting for us. It's not uncommon for them to be up into, the mid-60s in terms of the number of articles. They kind of fall into 4 general categories. The first, and pay no attention to the article numbers here, because they're going to change. The order will change, and some of these will come in, and some things will still come and go as we work with town council and the boards and committees. But they come in 4 general categories. The first big lump is all of the budgets, what we just talked about, K-8, Algonquin, general government, water and sewer enterprise fund. The next big lump is the revolving fund reauthorizations that we do every year. One thing new, and under the Municipal Modernization Act, we are now required to have a revolving fund bylaw that was supposed to prevent us from having to reauthorize these every year. The way it wound up getting written, we're going to need a bylaw and still have to reauthorize them every year. So I don't think they accomplished quite what they thought they wanted to. So we do have a placeholder right now for that bylaw. We've drafted something that's being reviewed by town council. So these may collapse into one article or into one bylaw with all the reauthorization. That's something that we're waiting for town council to advise us on.
We typically
We typically do
umbrella
it in
article.
one, yes,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
But we may more on a permanent basis be able to at least do something like that. So again, I'm showing them all so you can see what we're going to be addressing and the format of that. We hope to be able to collapse them down.
Yeah.
Next big lump of articles is the capital improvement plan. So these are the capital budget articles, and there's about 9 or 10 of those. The good news is, all capital projects that are going forward to town meeting are going to be paid for using available funds. So we don't anticipate that there'll be any additional tax impact. And this goes back to one of the reasons why our bond rating was increased a couple years ago, is we limited the amount of one-time, we don't use one-time revenues beyond 1% in our operating budget. So we take one-time revenues and we use them to pay for one-time capital. So it's been a great way for us to address our equipment and building needs without increasing our level of debt. So our level of debt is actually down to an all-time low at the moment. So those projects are on there. And then the last big, or the second to last big clump are the Community Preservation Act projects, and those will be coming to you at a subsequent meeting. You'll have a separate presentation on those. And then last but not least, Jason's favorite topic, medical marijuana. We have the zoning amendments. There's the zoning amendment for prohibition on marijuana. There's a general bylaw. And then the planning board is looking at a zoning amendment with regard to duplexes. So that's pretty much what you can expect for town meeting. Again, this is just a preliminary list. We're working through the details. These things may condense, a couple things may be pulled out, but I don't think you're seeing any major surprises. Dawn Rand mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, under her reports, that the Fire Station Building Committee has made the decision not to move forward at this town meeting. One of the factors with not moving forward is we anticipate, based on the Lincoln Street building project being finished, that we'll have approximately $1.3 million in leftover surplus budget from that $25.5 million project. We literally dipped into, almost none of the contingency on that project. And however, in order for us to access those unused bond proceeds, we need not only a town meeting vote, but a ballot vote as well. The other thing that we need, that we don't have, is we need the Massachusetts School Building Authority to actually release the funds. And we were supposed to be on their February 10th meeting agenda, and they delayed us to the April meeting. So all those factors just say, we're not quite ready. We cannot go to town meeting with an appropriation unless we have those funds in hand, and I can't guarantee that we're gonna have them in hand because MSBA isn't gonna release them and reimburse them to us by town meeting necessarily. So all those factors, and we need a little bit more time to work through it. The project's going very well. Architect is making great progress, but, we do not go to town meeting, I always say, with a half-baked cake. And part of that is not just the information, but time to have a process, a process discussion and input. And it's one thing to prepare for town meeting, but a ballot question, you want to make sure you have time to have appropriate public hearings and dialogue with the residents so they understand what it is that you're asking of them. So that project is not on here. So really, we're looking at routine equipment and building improvements, and that's basically it.
Very good. Thank you, John. Any questions?
Just the question everyone wants to know. One night or two?
Hey, listen, I always say I can do town meeting in one night.
Okay.
It's up to the audience how many nights they want to discuss things, and that's part of the.
I think so.
Think so?
Yeah, I think one.
But that's part of the process.
Yeah.
That's part of the process, and we never short-circuit the process.
So there's no talking, no one can talk, just move along.
Yeah, don't say that.
We all want to get to the marijuana articles anyway, so.
Really
When there's a
important
lot,
speech.
yeah, when there's a lie of like 20 people at the mic, it's like,
Next item, execution of cemetery deed 1042.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to execute cemetery deed 1042.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor. And any other business to come before the board?
I had originally requested a brief executive session, but we have not progressed with that health insurance discussion with that one unit, so we do not need that executive session this evening.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.